Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Chris Johnson. I'm one of the associate pastors here at Zion Lutheran Church in Wausau, Wisconsin, coming to you today with the word at the middle of the week. And the word that I would like to share with you at the middle of this week is from John chapter 3, a text that we are reading for Matins and Vespers today. And so our passage is from John chapter 3, verses 25 through 29, a very familiar passage that speaks of John the Baptist and his role of pointing away from himself. And so without further ado, let me go ahead and read this passage for you. St. John writes, "Now a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. And they came to John and said to him, 'Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him.' John answered, 'A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, but I must decrease.'" The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So last week we polished up our little mini-series, as it were, on the Song of Solomon as we marched through a very interesting and provocative book for these summer months. And today we conclude all of that. We started with Ephesians chapter 5 way back in June, then the Song of Solomon, and we conclude this week in John chapter 3. And with that image you hear of the bride and the bridegroom. We've been hearing that imagery throughout the summer of the bride and the bridegroom in the Song of Solomon, that of the relationship of Christ and his church. And here we get that imagery from John the Baptist himself, likening himself as the friend to the bridegroom, pointing away from himself to the bridegroom, and that the bride may hear his voice, the bride, of course, being the church. And this is a very provocative passage because for those of us who've been to weddings and who hasn't been to weddings, but one of the more interesting parts of modern day weddings, at least, is what the role of the friend of the bridegroom at the wedding reception, mainly, right? We often listen to the best man, the friend of the bridegroom, and the best woman, the maid of honor, and what they have to say about the bride and the bridegroom, their speeches. And so you hear mixes of tales of embarrassing things of comfort, things that are funny. And so you're never quite sure what you're going to get when you're at a wedding listening to a speech of the maid of honor or the best man. With John the Baptist, we know what we're going to get. John the Baptist, his role is the role of all Christians ultimately, and certainly for us as pastors, is to point away from ourselves and to the bridegroom. This is the man of the hour, right? Jesus Christ, he is the man of the hour. We direct everyone away from ourselves and our gifts and our characteristics and so on and so forth, and we direct people to Christ. And that ultimately is the goal of Scripture, is to drive and to lead and push and persuade everyone about who Jesus Christ is, his work, his person, what he has come to do, what he has come to say, because what he has to say has eternal value and is of eternal consequence if we reject him. And so this passage in John chapter 3 is a nice summation of all that we are doing, using that imagery of marriage, bride and bridegroom, the language of belonging and being connected, but also the importance of, as we got at in the last half of the Song of Solomon, at least, was directing everything to Christ, that everything is ultimately all about him. To be truly human is all about Christ. To know the Bible, it's all about Christ. To know what weddings are all about, the symbolism behind weddings, we must know and we must derive it all from Jesus Christ, that he is the focal point of human history, the focal point of Scripture, the focal point of our lives as Christian people. And this is what John simply reiterates in John chapter 3. John the Baptist reiterating in John's Gospel from John the Apostle, that Jesus must increase and we must decrease. Now, this isn't to say we are unimportant, but in the scheme of salvation history, we are but recipients of all that God has to give and all that God has to offer. We are, as Luther would say, we are but beggars coming with an open hand. And this is what the bridegroom has come to do, to speak his word, that not only the friend of the bridegroom may hear his voice, John the Baptist, but the entire church, and indeed the entire cosmos, may hear the voice of the Son of God, that he has come to redeem all creation, not just people, but all of creation. It's of cosmic proportions, and we really get a strong sense of that in the book of Colossians, Paul's letter to the Colossians. So just a really powerful chapter here, John chapter 3. We began with Nicodemus and we end with John the Baptist. Nicodemus, who didn't get it, and John the Baptist, who did get it and knew his role. And so a nice contrast right there in John's gospel, but also just a nice contrast for us as we have been walking through this language of love and of intimacy, of marriage, of masculinity and femininity, and what all that derives from and points us to. But ultimately, we are going with everything here that we've been focusing on this summer. We've been driving it all to Christ, because he is the bridegroom to whom we must listen and hear his voice, and so believe, be saved, and receive all that he has to offer. So may God, our Father, continue to open up your ears to hear what the bridegroom has to say about you and his love and his mercy and his grace and his favor and his pardon for you. And may God be with you this fall as summer now wanes away and the beauty of the fall weather begins to change things around us, and may the power of Christ continue to change and shape our lives in conformity with his. So may God be with you, and we will talk to you next time. Take care.